This blog show is made available to you by QP Local 2544 for informational purposes, as well as to provide general understandings of the topics discussed. QP's Code of Conduct and its equality statement are to be adhered to at all times during the duration of the show. The opinions expressed on the blog show are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions of QP Local 2544, its affiliates, and any partners. The explicit intent is to have open forum and to express and discuss various opinions on a range of topics. Should there be any concern or complaints, please forward them to info@qp2544.ca.
So I know that Jason has a question for you.
Hello, Robert. My name's Jason, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you again for coming in and speaking with us. We're all very excited about all of this new process we're going to try out. So the question I have to ask you is a really hot button topic. Currently, the Peel District School Board is dealing with challenges to the board's accommodation policy regarding religion. Can you describe some of the challenges dealing with this issue and how it has affected the board?
Yeah, thanks for that real easy question. Actually, do you know what? It is an easy question from my perspective because this should not be a challenge. The way I look at this one, and again, I'm coming from a union background, and so by analogy, and it's not a perfect analogy, but it works. By analogy, there are workers who require an accommodation for a medical reason, right?
Yep.
So you may have a worker who has a doctor's note that says can't climb the stairs. So if you've got the doctor's note, then the employer cannot require your member or me when I was a teacher to climb the stairs. Okay, we'll make sure you've got ground floor duties. That shouldn't be hard to do.
Yeah.
And one thing that we don't do is to quiz the person too closely, right? Got a doctor's note, that's all you need. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And we don't negotiate about it. Mm-hmm. Like we don't try and find a compromise on this. Okay, well, we'll take you halfway up the stairs and you're responsible for the other half. It'd be stupid. Religious accommodations aren't medical accommodations. However, like a medical accommodation, it's none of anybody else's business. So to the people who wonder, well, why aren't I getting an accommodation? Well, the answer is if you need an accommodation, you have to ask for it.
Yeah.
And if you're a unionized worker, it's even easier. Mm-hmm. If you're a kid and you need an accommodation, it's a little more complex. But we're in the business of looking after kids. So that shouldn't be difficult. So from a teacher perspective, this is what I can tell you. I don't know when exactly I first would have heard a morning announcement. And you guys work in schools, so you know how it goes. At some point in the 1990s, I would have heard an announcement saying Friday prayers in room 212, Friday at whatever time. And if you knew what that was about, if you knew it was for you, then you went at that time, right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for you, like it could be an announcement about volleyball. I'm not on a volleyball team and I don't like volleyball. I don't even need to know about that, right? So this was something for our Muslim students. Now, you know if you've got Muslim students, or you suspect you do because of the names, right? I never had a kid disrupt the class to say, gotta go, or come to class late causing a scene. Well, I was just fulfilling my right to Friday prayers. They found a way to do it quietly, I think mainly at lunchtime, after school, maybe shortening their obligation to make it fit between classes, but it was never, ever, ever a problem. And, since then, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I go to schools, I ask the school administrators, like, how are you dealing with this? And they tell me, and I said, has it ever been a problem? And they say no. Mm-hmm. And when I was working in schools myself, I was a union rep. And you guys are all union reps, so you're the complaints department, right? Yeah. If somebody's got a complaint, you're going to hear about it.
Yeah,
I was a department head, history department, so that would be a natural thing. People to say, what's all this about Friday prayers? There was never a problem about it. And then, of course, the board, with the best will in the world, came out with a change to not the policy but the procedure, which was to create a bank of sermons, and then that created a concern in the schools about their rights to freedom of religion and freedom of speech, mm-hmm. and it got elevated on this side, and it drew a lot of unwanted attention to the whole business of Friday prayers. And there are a lot of people who assume a lot of things that just aren't right, that just aren't true, and quite frankly aren't any of their business. At the last couple of board meetings, spearheaded by CUPE, to the admiration of all concerned, we've had a strong worker presence showing just who's right on this one. And the people who are complaining about it have been out on the street because they don't even have the courage to come and sign in.
Yeah.
They got a lot of courage when they're tweeting or retweeting somebody else's hatred, but they won't come into the meeting if they've got to identify themselves. And quite frankly, if they are right, if they do have a good point, they're trying to make it in the wrong place. They need to be picketing Queen's Park.
Yeah.
Because what the Peel Board is doing is upholding the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and it's really just that simple.
And I think that's the worst of it, is that people are taking an issue such as religious accommodation, having a debate about it, but they're doing it at the wrong place. I mean, the Peel District School Board doesn't have the ability to eliminate religious accommodation, as that is something that is there through the Human Rights Code.
But we do feel that that's right. I mean, at the same time that this is upheld by the Ontario Human Rights Code, we also uphold the Ontario Human Rights Code. We think this is the right thing
My
to do.
point in saying that, though, is that these people that are coming out there are really doing it for what purpose? There is no purpose. They're not going to accomplish anything by doing that at a district school board meeting where the interest should really be student success. I mean, take it up. Queen's Park, exactly. Agreed with you. And, it's been a great interview so far. And I just have one more question for you.
Hold on. But before we move on, Dan, do you mind?
Sure.
So, Robert, let me ask. So, amongst these discussions and these issues that we've had with the board as of late, there's been a lot of negative media. Okay. So my question to you is, how, as a trustee, do you promote growth and ensure parents that the Peel District School Board is a place for them to have their children come to get an education? I mean, I can give you my opinions, but they're a bit biased because I work for the board. I believe in the system that we have. But how do you promote that? How do you ensure parents, amongst the negative media, that the Peel District School Board is still a place to bring your children to get an education?
Okay, that is a tough question, but again, I think it has an easy answer. I think the answer in this case is simply to tell the truth. I believe that open, honest, informed debate is a healthy thing in a democratic society.
Definitely.
I shouldn't be frightened. I shouldn't run or refuse to answer my phone or answer an email because I think it's going to be a difficult question. I've been elected to deal with that, and I've got lots of support for it. Right? I'm not, when I answer questions of the sort that you're referring to, hung out to dry on my own that way. Although I felt for a while like the Peel Board was kind of being hung out to dry, relative to, where were the other boards? Why weren't they putting their hands up and saying, well, we make these accommodations too? Yeah. So I can give you concrete examples about this. So one of the things that happens sometimes is that somebody phones and says, I want a personal meeting on this. A phone call's not good enough. Some trustees don't want to do that. There's a security issue there, and I understand that. But I'm not worried. Ward 6 and 11's Happy Valley. It's a peaceful place to live and work. I do know what generally happens, though. The guy that I agree to meet at Tim Hortons turns out to be 4 or 5 people, right? Always happens. Now, you wouldn't do that in union negotiations. That would be... That's really bad faith when it comes right down to it. Yeah. But they don't know that. And they don't do it to try and intimidate me, and I don't mind. So a recent example would be where a group of members from the South Asian community, concerned about prayer in schools, had some very specific questions for me about it. Their differences are cultural, and they go back in history. And there are old antagonisms there, which are just not going to go away. I hope that in Canada, people come from wherever they come from, and we all came from somewhere else, that the old hatreds are left behind. So we don't have Irish Protestants and Irish Catholics shooting at each other here. Yeah. We don't have Serbs and Croats shooting at each other here, but they're in our community, right? And for most of us, that's indeed what we want. But sometimes an issue like this will bring some of that to a head. So I think it's my job to sit down with them and try and explain our point of view, and to make it the teachable moment, as we would say in education.
Yeah.
Sometimes people phone you when they've just plain got misinformation. One woman phoned me and she said, this all started when they took the Lord's Prayer in O Canada out of the opening exercises.
That's when
I
I hear the most.
I said, well, hold on. I said, we don't do the Lord's Prayer in schools anymore. We used to, and then that went to a time of silent reflection in most schools, but it was taken out. But we still sing O Canada. Mm-hmm. It's in the Education Act.
Yeah.
Says the lady, well, I didn't know. So sometimes we found the same thing over sex ed, right? Mm-hmm. That there were a few ideas that just got twisted, yes, and then inflated, and then twisted some more, and inflated some more. But when you sit down and talk to people, they go, oh, okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because they had been told that teachers had flashcards with intimate body parts that they were using in junior grades, and no.
Misinformed, and they ran with it.
Exactly.
Okay, this is perfect. So, Robert, there is a ton of misinformation in a lot of topics that go on with the Peel District School Board. You nailed it. There needs to be open dialogue where you're not afraid, and that you can have a mature, responsible conversation and try to get people to see what's really going on. I would like to extend an invitation to you that possibly you could come back and participate with us in one of those open dialogues in the near, not so near future.
You got my number.
Awesome.
One last thing, Dan, if you allow me, Bob.
You got the floor.
A lot of this is. I'm just going to say this, and then you reply to it any way you want. I know there's a lot of our members. Okay, they do hold the adage, and they do have a thinking of, religion. It's not. It should not be in the school system, whether it's an accommodation piece or not. Now, you answered, in my opinion, the question by saying, it's a human rights piece, and we're enforcing the human rights on this, but. What do you say to those members, and how do you get them to understand beyond that this is an important piece for the board to take a stance on?
Yeah, I know just what you're saying, and it is a tough question, and I can't give you the perfect answer, but there are some things that they need to think about. First of all religions have the right to an accommodation. So. This just happens to be a particular religion which has, as I've learned, as a requirement of faith, to pray in a congregational fashion on Friday. So the requirement is congregational. You're supposed to do it with other people, if they're there.
Okay.
Right? So that means that you do kind of need a room for that, a room at a time. In some people have said to us, well, if I want to pray, I just go somewhere quietly and pray. Mm-hmm. That's just my business. Yeah, exactly right. But here are some people who have to do this with other folks. That's just what it is. I would say as well that Western religions are accommodated already by the weekend. So if you're Jewish, provided you're home from work by sundown on Friday night, you're okay. You're not working on the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. If you're a Christian, Sunday, right? And nobody says you have to go to church, and most people, in my view, aren't going to church these days. Organized religion has taken quite a hit in the 21st century, and it's further accommodated by stat holidays. So Christians will never have to go to work on Easter or Christmas.
Unless they choose to do so.
Unless they choose to do so, and unions like CUPE will make sure they get double time on those days, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one part of it. The whole issue around secularization, which I think is what you're talking about. There should be no religion in schools. Is further complicated, I believe, by the fact that you can't ever really do that because people are spiritual creatures, no matter what. And there's always going to be, I think when I was in high school, it was the inter-school faith fellowship or something. There was a Christian group anyway. I went to school in the 60s, so demographics were very different from what they are today. but that would have been accommodated outside the school day. Your members will know because they set up and take down from church meetings that are commonly held in schools, right? We rent out the spaces to church groups, and nobody seems to be particularly bothered by that. I'm going to say this as well, that when I was a kid, and I remember I was a minister's kid, Anglican. So my dad was an Anglican priest. There were no female priests. There was no gay marriage. In fact, homosexuality was a crime, right? So 50 years later, how have things changed?
Yeah.
You know, there are female priests, there are female bishops, there's gay marriage, right?
Yeah.
And it hasn't been accepted by everybody. But the changes in that area have been huge. So I hear people say, well, in Islam they separate the men from the women, and the Quran says all these things, and that's not right. Okay, but we can work with that, and things will change. And if you take a good look at the Christian Bible, it's full of a lot of stuff that people don't actually know or believe.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
100%.
As my mother would have said, the devil cites scripture to his own purpose, but
Yeah.
maybe you should edit that out. I don't know.
Beautiful. You know what? I love the analogies. You know, it's clear you're a very educated man. Tim, did you have a question?
No, you do.
I have a question. That's my bad. As you're probably aware, I'm certain you're aware, over the years, Kippy Local 2544 has taken a lot of hits financially. A number of years ago, they changed the funding formula, which meant that older schools got a higher level of funding than newer schools that were built after, I'm not sure of the year, I believe it was 1980. And we took a big hit there financially. Most recently, the Ministry of Education has eliminated the top-up funding. And the top-up funding was a fund that was given to school boards in recognition that they have a building that's open, but it may not be at capacity in terms of student enrollment. And 2 years ago, I believe, they eliminated that top-up funding over a 3-year phase out. And next year will be the last of that. It's had a huge ramification on our board in that we lost, I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million a year. And I know that the trustees certainly try to offset some of that by using, over the last 2 years, I believe last year, correct me if I'm wrong, was $500,000 that the Board of Trustees freed up from their working reserves to address that in terms of elementary, vocal music, and French. And then this year they freed up another $1 million. I believe it was working capital or working reserves. So it's still another impact next year. We'll be losing more money. And in terms of how that impacts our membership, we've lost, I believe we'll be losing 32 FTE next year. So it has a huge impact on our membership. Is there anything that the board's talking about in terms of maybe campaigning against the Ministry of Education or polling them and trying to get them to change their views on that top-up funding? Or what are the trustees doing about this? Anything in particular?
Okay, so that's a big question. Educational finance to me is a lot like astrophysics, right? I believe in it, but I couldn't explain to you how it works.
Yeah.
And I know in my previous union role, I went to a lot of meetings where I discovered that people threw around a lot of terminology, and sometimes nobody really knew what they were talking about. I'll give you a real example. I was at a 2-hour PowerPoint, Friday evening, dry as dust, and everybody's talking about GSN.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm not sure I know what GSN stands for. And finally somebody asked, and you know what? Nobody could sort of pick it out of their head. It's a grant for student needs, I think, isn't it?
I'm glad you said that. I didn't even mention what the acronym meant, and you're 100% right. Grants for student needs.
Yeah. So, we talk about this stuff till we're blue in the face, but there's nobody who's really got the big picture on this. Somebody at Queen's Park should, but I don't share that confidence. Now, I do have a great deal of faith in the people at the Peel Board who are responsible for budget. And as a trustee, I've been through this. This will be my third budget. So I'm still on a pretty steep learning curve. They're going to give us a binder. And as you know, we all know this much about educational financing, most of the money is already line item, right? So you've got so much money for various things. The big one being salaries and benefits for employees. And there's a certain amount of money for retrofitting old buildings. So a couple of my schools, the Woodlands and Streetsville, that were badly in need of refurbishment, got $7-8 million a piece for some curb appeal and some new windows and doors, and $8 million didn't really go all that far.
Mm-hmm.
But some brick and mortar additions.
Yeah.
Now, I understand your concern, and when we do that, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're also funded for somebody to clean those new spaces,
Mm-hmm.
or to deal with whatever problems obtain from the fact that we've made these changes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when, as a union person, I was first having to deal with the notion that here's a new school. And I think, I'm from a 50-year-old school. It would be really nice to have a new school.
Yeah.
Well, it's not opening on time, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole host of other problems. So you think when you're in the old school, it'd be nice to have the new school's problem. Well, sometimes they're thinking the reverse.
Yeah.
That doesn't answer your question. I know it doesn't. So in an area like where I am in 6 and 11, demographics are such that families are growing up, and the old people in my demographic, are often still in those houses, but there's no children. So they're not, the kids aren't going to the neighborhood school in the same numbers anymore.
Precisely.
And we've got empty classrooms. Ideally, as a teacher, I can tell you, most teachers really like the idea that they can have their own classroom. In elementary school, so you've got Miss Brown's grade 1, you've got Miss Smith's grade 1, you've got Miss Ali's grade 1, and so on. If the school's big enough, you've also got Mademoiselle's French class, and the kids go to the French room for French, and Miss Ellie can stay in her class and do her prep and change her bulletin boards and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they would all like that. If the money's not there, and the principal's told, you've got X number of kids and Y number of rooms, and the math is that we got to close two rooms. Principal doesn't want this either. You guys don't want it because you're going to lose point something of an FTE, and it all adds up. So the feeling that I have personally, I can only speak for myself on this, but I know this is shared by at least some trustees, and we will have the debate, is that we're a big board where we should be able to find FTE is full-time equivalent. There we go.
There you go. Good job.
Because people have part jobs, and I know that's a lot more complex in CUPE than it is in OSSTF.
Yeah, specifically with our school attendants.
Yeah.
And we're 4.75, and they're actually a 0.5 FTE as opposed to a full FTE or a half FTE.
And occasional teachers generate those kind of decimal points as well. But myself, I was always 1 FTE.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Well, until I went on a modified work plan. When I came 0.67, whatever, right? Yeah. So that's what that's all about. But in any case, what it means is there's going to be fewer jobs for your members if we close classrooms. I'm concerned about that for a couple of reasons educationally. One is that when you talk about vocal music, it's not what it once was. Really, the music programs which teachers are bringing to the kids to try and not just to promote the subject, but to inspire learning, have some gear attached to them. So they've got African drums, they've got didgeridoos, they've got various kinds of noisemakers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what, if you had a box of harmonicas, you could put those on a cart. But African drums, you don't put on a cart.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that just don't work about it. And if you want to have a friendly learning environment which is conducive to the kind of learning that we really want, it's nice to have music in the music room.
Yeah.
It's nice to have French in the French room. We have some schools where there's just so many kids that's not possible anyway, and everybody knows it. but where you've got a room that's going to be sitting empty. And you know from a QP, right, you may correct me on this, but I think I'm right, that if you close a classroom and you leave it for a couple of years, it's going to cost you almost as much money to get the room back up to operating standard as you saved in keeping it clean during that time and depriving the kids of its use.
Precisely,
So-
yeah. No, you answered the question very well. And, my point in asking that question wasn't, I mean, we know it's not the trustees, and we made a point of that at our last PD day where, we wanted our members to be aware that this isn't a problem between QP 2544 and the Peel District School Board. This is a problem that QP 2544 and the school board has with the Ministry of Education, because ultimately they're the ones that give us the funding to do what we need to do as educators in the school board.
Yeah, so Dan, I think it's a very good thing for you to work, for QP to work with the Elementary Teachers Federation, who also have a vested interest in this, for the working conditions of their members, which are the learning conditions of our kids, and that is what it's all about. And I see every reason in the world why ETFO and QP and the school board should be partners in lobbying the provincial government for what really, in the bigger scheme of things, isn't that much money. They're going to give us roughly $1.8 billion to run the Peel District School Board for 1 year. $1.8 billion.
Yeah.
So,
2.5. Well,
$2.5 million top up funding. We should be able to wiggle that in there somewhere if we present the case properly. And the more partners you have in that who are acting in solidarity, the better.
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, shared campaign interests are important for all of us, and I think it's a message we need to hammer home to our members. That sometimes there are days we need to hold hands and be on the same page on some of these issues.
And Robert, I know we're running out of time here. I know you're a busy man, and we don't want to tie up your entire day. But I felt it important. I noticed in your bio that you do a lot of work for Eden Food for Change, and that's also something that's close to my heart, simply because they offered my daughter her college practicum there, and she was working there for a while. And I'm surprised that the two of you haven't crossed paths. But do you want to speak about Eden Food for Change for a moment?
I'd be happy to do that. One of the cool things that happens when you retire is you have time when you used to be at work, and but it's not all good. You find you have hours that you need to fill up, and you feel kind of useless.
Yeah,
you go cold turkey when you retire.
I look forward to joining you in that club in 8 years.
Yeah, I've been old and I've been young, and I'll tell you which one's better. But in any case, to answer your question, my darling daughter, looked at me and said, "Well, Dad needs something." To occupy his time in a fruitful fashion, and so she hooked me up with the Eden Community Food Bank as it was then. It's now transformed into Eden Food for Change, and I just loved it. The chance to work with people. It's work which is really, really appreciated. The clients always say thank you. One of my jobs, I'm the muscle, if you can believe it. Carry people's stuff up for them, and they always say thank you, God bless you, the whole thing. And these are people who aren't usually having a real good day because they've had to go to the food bank, right? Right now, the food bank has fallen on some hard times. They've got funding issues too, and they're a lot closer to the bottom in terms of their funding than school boards will ever be. So they have a genuine need for cash. The cash helps pay for the handful of paid workers that we have there. You have to have paid workers. You've got overhead for the buildings. And we have to purchase things like cheese and eggs and milk because you can't buy a bag of milk and put it in a bin at the food store and have somebody pick it up once a week. So we have to purchase this stuff. Last week there were no eggs. The first time I have seen no eggs at my site last Monday.
Beautiful. Well, I will tell you that I'm definitely going to speak to our executive. Through our bylaws, we do have the ability to make a $100 donation, and it'd be my hope that maybe QP 2544 can help out Eden Food for Change by making a $100 donation to them from us. Do you have any other questions, Jim?
No questions, but I do have something to promote myself. The Peel region is hosting the Special Olympics this year in 2017. This is something that's important, I think, for our members and its communities and the schools. So I'm encouraging members to get involved. There are volunteers that are needed for the Olympics. this year, and we encourage members to get involved. I will be making a presentation as the treasurer of the local for some financial contributions to the games. It'd be important, I think, for us and the community, and to get partnerships involved, and we should be sponsoring one of the athletes. So I think that's something that we should be as a local interested in.
Can you get a response to that?
Yeah, you know what, Jim, I don't necessarily disagree with you at all. Just some more information out there is our sister local across the street in the Catholic Board, QP Local 1483, has already sponsored a PL athlete as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that we should be considering.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So anybody else got anything for Robert?
No, thank you. Thanks
Robert,
for being here.
I want to thank you on behalf of all of us and our members, 1,500 of us, for coming out here and spending some time with us. I certainly learned a lot, and I think the one thing that I learned is that if I was a resident of Mississauga Wards 6 and 11 in a year's time, coming elections, I would definitely be casting a ballot for you. Unfortunately, I don't live in those wards, but I know that working through PLQ or QP 2544 and PLQP Council, I'm certain that you are a candidate that we will be endorsing at the next municipal elections. And again, I do appreciate you coming in, and we'll definitely have to get together again soon and have another chat. Thank you very much for coming in, Robert.
Pleasure was mine. Thank you.
All right, take care.